Hey guys, Matt from Amateur Films, and welcome to a brand new video where I'll be showing you what Sarah and I picked up during the most recent Criterion sale that's actually still currently going on. Barnes & Noble doesn't ship internationally, but we were able to pick up quite a few titles from Amazon Australia and have them imported. In total, for this sale haul in this video, we'll be showing you 14 different releases that we picked up, 2 of which are box sets, which is pretty exciting. We went pretty all out with this sale, and we actually even have a few more on the way. But I still wanted to film this video regardless because, the other Criterions that are still on their way, we'll show them in a future Blu-ray haul as well. Just a quick thing to mention as well, in the previous Vinegar Syndrome haul, I did say that I hadn't had the time to watch any of those movies at the time that I was filming them. However, in this particular haul, I actually have been able to get around to watching quite a few of these Criterions, which is really good. So we'll be able to actually talk about them properly. And also, you might have noticed that Sarah hasn't been in the last few videos. She will be in some upcoming videos. It's just, we've had some sort of work-related things going on, and just as far as our video filming schedules line up, it just hasn't worked out that way. So she'll either be in the next video or the one after that, but she's really looking forward to obviously filming another one. Anyway, let's get started. The first I'm going to show you is actually probably one of the most popular titles that people are picking up at the moment because it is a new release and obviously the film's amazing, and that is Memories of Murder, directed by Bong Joon-ho. While a lot of people did get introduced to Bong Joon-ho through his film Parasite, which did really well at the Oscars a few years ago, obviously he'd been making films quite a while before that, and Memories of Murder is, I think, maybe his second or third feature film, and it was one of the ones that I had been wanting to watch for a really long time. I had seen it prior to picking this up, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's an incredible film, but up until the point that Criterion had released this, it was actually really hard for me to get a physical release, and I had to resort to an unfortunate pirated copy, but that was the only way that I could actually feasibly watch the movie at the time. So I knew that when Criterion announced the Blu-ray release of the film, I was going to pick it up immediately. So this film is set in the 1980s, and it's about these detectives who are investigating a serial killer who is terrorizing a local community in South Korea. And it's such an interesting case that is being explored in the film. It's actually based on a real life case, which I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, just an excellent film. The cinematography is absolutely brilliant. Just the way he stages certain scenes and just the performances he gets out of the actors, but in particular from Song Kang-ho, who went on to star in a couple of his films, if I'm not mistaken. He's definitely in Parasite. But yeah, this is just an absolutely amazing movie. Such a great film from, so early on in his career, because this film came out in 2003. If you like sort of crime thriller, investigative type movies, I highly recommend this one because it does, it has all the familiar tropes, like investigating a crime scene, detectives interviewing witnesses and whatnot, but just the way it's shot, the setting in particular, and just, everything about it, it has a really unique flavor to it. And regarding the real life case, which did in fact happen during the 1980s, that was actually the first properly documented case of a serial killer that was active in South Korea. So when this film came out, it was very culturally significant in Korea at the time. The desperation of the detectives to solve the crime, it really sort of does explain some of their methods and why they sort of blunder about it quite a bit. It's just a very interesting case, and I think it's just masterfully tackled in this film, so absolutely highly recommended. Definitely pick this up if you're a fan of Bong Joon-ho, or even if you're not, because obviously it's just a fantastic film. Next up, we have the film Antichrist, directed by Lars von Trier, and I am a fan of Lars von Trier. I think he's a really interesting director, and even when I know that he's put a film out, I'm definitely going to go see it. I was quite a big fan of The House that Jack Built, even if it was just a little bit self-indulgent. I have seen this film once or twice, quite a number of years ago. I'm yet to rewatch it since it came in the mail, but I sort of watched it at that time, similar to what I said about Salo, or the 120 Days of Sodom, where I initially watched it because I had heard it was disturbing. I wasn't actually really paying attention to what was happening in the film and trying to analyze it in a proper way. So I'm looking forward to actually watching the film as it was intended, to sort of analyze the themes and see what the film's actually about rather than just trying to watch something shocking. So I'm looking forward to seeing this again. So this next one is one of the ones that I haven't watched yet, and that is Some Like It Hot, directed by Billy Wilder. I really like Billy Wilder as a director. He's done some amazing films. I really loved The Apartment, but this is just one of his classics that I just haven't seen yet, so I knew that I needed to pick it up. It stars Tony Curtis, who I think is an amazing actor. I loved him in The Sweet Smell of Success, and it also stars Jack Lemmon, who I thought was really great in. He's great in The Apartment, obviously. I liked him in The China Syndrome as well, which was good. But yeah, Some Like It Hot and Sunset Boulevard are both films from Billy Wilder that I'm still yet to see, so I've been meaning to pick them both up, but I finally have this one, so I'm sure it won't be long before I finally check it out. Next up is The Parallax View, directed by Alan J. Pakula, I think is how you say his name, and it stars Warren Beatty. But I first became familiar with this director through his work on the film Klute, actually, which Criterion did release a while back, and I really did enjoy that. It's a great sort of thriller film starring Donald Sutherland. But this is a political thriller film from the 1970s. I really do enjoy that genre of film, especially when they come out in the 1970s, because I know there's something about that particular decade where they seem to tackle those, conspiracy-driven political thrillers really well. The film opens up with the presidential candidate being assassinated and, the gunman who's supposedly responsible is apprehended and the case is essentially closed. But what we find out is that over the next couple of years, I think that over the next 3 years or so, a lot of people who were witnesses to the crime when it happened and the people surrounding the case start dying in mysterious circumstances. And this leads to our character, played by Warren Beatty, whose name is Joseph Frady. He's like an investigative reporter. He starts investigating what's going on. He ends up stumbling across this corporation called the Parallax Corporation, and the film sort of goes from there. One thing I really liked about this film is how it did build tension all throughout the film. In general, I am partial to those investigative type films, so my interest is already going to be piqued from that. But in particular, the tension I thought was tackled really well, because in a lot of these conspiracy-driven films, it is quite scary to think of like an organization that's higher up and has this crazy influence over society. But one thing that I really did admire about how this film was tackled was that rather than just overtly show this organization and just out them for what they are, it instead chooses to hint at their power. So you're sort of left as the viewer to think about what they could actually achieve in society, which is really scary thought. A lot of it is left to your own imagination of what they're capable of. And I think ultimately when I finished watching this film, I thought that was a smart choice because, as I said, I thought it made it more scary for me personally. And obviously it's not like a horror film or anything like that, but just the idea of this larger organizational entity having such power over society, I thought is a really scary concept to me. So I thought that that idea was tackled quite well in this film. Next up is the film Breaker Morant. And this one's directed by Bruce Beresford. I personally haven't seen this movie before, but Sarah has. She was actually the one who insisted we pick it up during the sale, and I'm definitely not complaining because I've been wanting to watch a lot more Australian cinema in general. This one's supposed to be an all-time classic, and I know that my parents and her parents, and I think just a lot of people from that generation grew up watching this film because it is, as I said, it's supposed to be a classic. It's a court drama film, I think, based on these lieutenants who have to go to court. It's got something to do with war crimes perpetrated by their superior officers. So, it's a court drama, so I'm a big fan of that genre as well. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching this one. I'm expecting really good things. So we have another Wes Anderson film to add to the collection, actually, and that is the Darjeeling Limited. And from what I can tell, I think this is one of his films that isn't talked about as much as some of his other ones, which I'm not really sure I understand, because I actually really, really enjoyed this film, and without overthinking it, it might be in my top 5 from him, actually. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely great. One thing that people always say about Wes Anderson, understandably, is that, he has a very distinctive visual style. But, that style definitely comes through in some of his films more so than others. Like, for example, The Grand Budapest Hotel. Definitely, you can tell that Wes Anderson's style is, like, extremely heavily featured in that film. Whereas I think in The Darjeeling Limited, it takes this little bit of a step back. Like, you can definitely, obviously, when you're watching this, you know that Wes Anderson would have directed this film. But I think there's a good balance here between style and actual substance as well. I really, in particular, liked the dialogue and the character dynamics between the three brothers in the film, played by Adrian Brody, Jason Schwartzman, and Owen Wilson. I thought they're all fantastic. And I really liked the setting of the film as well. It's set in India. But yeah, just watching these three brothers develop their relationship over the course of the film, I thought was really great. But yeah, his style also comes through really well in this film too. Highly recommend this one. As I said, I know some people tend to gravitate towards some of his other films, and while they're all fantastic, definitely don't skip out on the Darjeeling Limited. So this next film is an all-time American classic, and that is, of course, The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols and starring Dustin Hoffman and Anne Bancroft. Sarah and I had never seen this film before, but we watched it together for the first time last night, and we both did quite enjoy it. It's really simple plot. Basically, Benjamin Braddock, played by Dustin Hoffman, he's a recent university graduate, and he's trying to figure out what to do with his life. And in the midst of, trying to figure himself out, he ends up starting an affair with Anne Bancroft's character, Mrs. Robinson, before eventually, after a few months, deciding to pursue her daughter. So it actually does share a lot of common plot events and tropes with a lot of other romantic comedies, but it definitely does have its own unique take on the genre, in my opinion. While I definitely did enjoy this film, there were one or two elements that I did want to discuss. I'll probably stumble over it, but bear with me. When I was initially viewing this film, I came away thinking that the first half of the film was a lot stronger than the second half, and that was mostly because I thought that Benjamin Braddock's relationship with Mrs. Robinson was a lot more sort of detailed and nuanced than his eventual relationship with the daughter Elaine in the second half of the film. I thought that the decisions that Braddock and Elaine made in the second half of the film were very erratic, impulsive, and just didn't really make a lot of sense. And in general, I just thought that Elaine's character wasn't she wasn't developed that well. But when I sort of took a step back and I thought about the context of this film and when it came out, I started to sort of understand why they would make those sorts of decisions in the second half. This film was one of the many examples of media that came out during the counterculture period of the 1960s, and one of the big things at that time was that a lot of the youth were sort of facing uncertainty about what to do with their lives, and that was coupled with the fact that there was a divide between those youths and the older generation as well. And that's certainly a driving theme in this movie that I think is explored very well. And when you consider the fact that, you know, there was a lot of uncertainty with the people who were Benjamin Braddock's age at the time, it does sort of explain his and Elaine's rash behavior in the second half of the film. I still think a lot of the behaviors he exhibits in the film are a bit strange, and he does push Elaine's boundaries a little bit too much. I think it's actually quite creepy, but I guess if you sort of consider the fact that a lot of the social norms between men and women were different during that time, I guess it makes it a little bit more sense. I still don't think it excuses it. He definitely was quite creepy at the time, but regardless, I think that sort of does help to explain why the plot went the way it did in the second half of the film. Yeah, I still think this is definitely a must-see film. It's a prime, it's an amazing piece of pop culture, and as I said, there's a lot of great things about this film. Next up is the film My Dinner with Andre. And I did promise my friend Kenny that I would wait to watch this with him, but I folded. I'm sorry, Kenny, I did watch it, but I will rewatch it with you. I got this film because, you know, I'm a fan of, I guess you could call it minimalistic filmmaking, because, you know, this film is essentially just a conversation between two characters, literally over dinner, as the title indicates. The actors are Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory. And yeah, I really did enjoy it. You know, I like other films that are similar to this, like the films from Richard Linklater from the Before trilogy, for example, and also Dazed and Confused, where literally the main draw of those films is the characters literally just talking to one another. So if you're a fan of like dialogue and just like writing in general, those films are great, and so is this one. And one thing I really did admire about this film was that it didn't feel like it was trying to pull the viewer to one perspective over the other. Over the course of the movie, I did find myself identifying with the points that one character was making before, you know, changed my mind and, you know, sort of understanding what the other character was saying, which I thought was done really well. I will say one thing, it didn't take me out of the film, but the characters come from like a theater background, which is proves to be the basis of a lot of their conversations within the film. Like, it starts off talking about the theater and whatnot. So initially I wasn't able to relate, but eventually their conversations sort of grow to be about more worldwide concepts, if that makes sense. So I didn't feel alienated while I was watching this movie, even though I'm not from a theater background, if that makes sense. Definitely recommended, as I said, if you enjoy films that are very dialogue focused. I really did enjoy it, and I think if you like those things, you'll like it too. This next film is My Own Private Idaho, directed by Gus Van Sant and starring River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves. Sarah and I haven't watched this one yet. This was a bit of a blind buy for us, although I do know about the director. I haven't seen many of his films. In fact, I've only seen two, those being Good Will Hunting, which I really liked, and the remake of Psycho, which is not quite as good. But I have been interested in his films for quite a while. I've been wanting to watch this one, as well as Milk with Sean Penn, and also Drugstore Cowboy with, I think, Matt Dillon. He's a director that I have been wanting to see more films from in general. But yeah, it's supposed to be a classic. It'll be cool to see another early film from Keanu Reeves as well, so we'll see how it goes. Next up, we have the film Ghost World. This one's directed by Terry Zwigoff, I think is how you say his name, and it stars Thora Birch as the character Enid and Scarlett Johansson as the character Rebecca. And essentially, the film's about these two characters. They've just finished high school and they're trying to figure out what to do. Enid has gone to like a summer school art program kind of thing, while Rebecca is trying to find a job. And basically, they're just doing stuff to alleviate their boredom. And the prime example being catfishing the character played by Steve Buscemi, and it sort of goes from there. This was the first time watching it, but I can tell that if I'd seen it when I was a bit younger, I probably would have gravitated towards it, and it would have been one of my comfort movies, because it does have that sort of, you know, early 2000s nostalgic feeling, which I've talked about a few times, and the suburban setting in particular does remind me of the area that I grew up in as well. While this one isn't my favorite film from the ones that I've picked up today in this whole video, I can definitely see myself revisiting this one in the future, because, you know, it's got that nostalgic element that I talked about before, and it's just a well-written teen drama film, so definitely recommend checking it out if that interests you. So the last film I'll be showing you before I go into the box sets is Ugetsu, directed by Kenji Mizoguchi, and I've been wanting to get this film for so long, and unsurprisingly, I absolutely loved it when I watched it. I first heard about this film, I was watching like Criterion recommendation videos and whatnot, but I remember watching a video of Martin Scorsese, and he said that this was one of his favorite films when he was discussing world cinema, so I knew that I wanted to give it a try. This film was set in the 1500s, so during the samurai period, and I would say that the large majority of films that I've watched that are based during this time are like, you know, Kurosawa's samurai films, or, you know, the Zatoichi films, so large-scale, you know, action, adventure type films. But sometimes it's a good change of pace to watch a film like Ugetsu, or, you know, another film like Onibaba from the 60s, or Harakiri as well, where rather than going on this big grand adventure, it focuses more on the characters and the actual landscape during that time. Because, you know, if you can imagine living during the 1500s, it was, you know, people were living a harsh reality then, like scavenging for food, barely managing to get by. And obviously, you know, in the past, Kurosawa has addressed some of these themes before, obviously, in his films, but it's like a primary driving force in a film like Ugetsu, which is pretty much it's a relationship drama set against the backdrop of the harsh living conditions of the 1500s in Japan. I know I've talked a lot about cinematography in this video, but yet again, I just have to say it's just done so well in Ugetsu. The film has this like particularly ethereal quality to it, and while I won't give anything away, there are supernatural elements to this film. And, you know, it's not a particularly scary film for me, but I do remember when I was watching the supernatural sequences in the film that the way it was shot and the way the scenes were blocked, it really did elevate the tension for me, so I thought that was done really well. And I also just like how Kenji Mizoguchi sort of filmed the landscape of the 1500s Japan era. I thought he sort of crafted that really well too. And, you know, at the end of the day, as I said at the start, it's not an adventure epic or anything. It's rather, it focuses on like the emotional journeys of these characters, essentially. It's a tale of like ambition, greed, regret, and suffering. And it's just, yeah, it's a really, really well put together, masterful film. I highly recommend it for sure. So the last two releases I'll be showing you are indeed box sets, and I'll start off with the very, very massive Essential Fellini box set. I'm so happy to finally have this box set because I've been wanting this one since it was first announced. Admittedly, similar to when I first bought the Ingmar Bergman collection, actually, that Criterion put out a couple of years ago, I've been very familiar with Fellini, as I was with Bergman, but I hadn't actually seen a lot of his films. In fact, I've only ever seen 8.5 from Fellini, so to a lot of you, maybe it's a bit of an impulsive decision to just go flat out with a box set which packages all of his films. Maybe the smarter thing to do would have been to try out some of his films, but I've done enough research about Fellini, and, you know, I liked 8.5 enough that I was willing to take the chance on this box set because, you know, Fellini is supposed to be one of the greatest directors of all time, and I really want to see his other classic films. So even if I don't end up enjoying those films, which is very unlikely, I'm sure I probably will enjoy them, I know that I'll at least learn something from it and see what kind of impact he made on films that came after him. So really, really looking forward to digging into this set. In particular, I really want to check out Amarcord. That was one that I've been wanting to see for quite a long time, and I am due for a rewatch of 8.5 as well. So very, very glad to have the Essential Fellini set. Let me know if you have a particular favorite from Fellini. And so the last one I'll be showing you today is, of course, the World of Wong Kar-wai box set. Just like the Fellini set, I've been wanting to get this one since day one. And actually, just like the Fellini set as well, I'd only ever seen one film by Wong Kar-wai at the time of purchasing this, which was In the Mood for Love, but which, you know, Sarah and I both absolutely loved. So I thought this one was a pretty safe bet. And since getting this one in the mail, I have watched the Chungking Express and also Fallen Angels, both of which, again, unsurprisingly, I absolutely adored. I'm probably going to watch Happy Together next. I know that one of the criticisms of this box set was that, you know, for this release, apparently Wong Kar-wai, he altered the color grading of the films, and it has like a much more of a green tint. Normally, it probably wouldn't be something that bothered me, and I haven't really noticed anything that stood out, although the only film that I have seen from him, as I said, is In the Mood for Love, and I haven't since rewatched this print of it since I've gotten this in the mail. So I guess I'll see if it's something that bothers me, although I don't really expect it to be something that, you know, is concerning. But yeah, let me know what your favorite Wong Kar-wai film is. I absolutely am really enjoying going through his films. I can definitely see why he's such a revered director and why so many people were anticipating this this box set. So yeah, so glad to have this one, and I'm sure I'll be getting through the rest of these films very soon. Awesome, so that brings us to the end of the video. I can't tell at the moment, but I feel like this probably would have been a longer one, so if you did watch the whole thing, thank you very much. Yeah, this haul has been one of my favorite ones of recent times, and as I said at the start of the video, we actually have a few more Criterions on their way, which we'll probably feature in a separate Blu-ray haul video, so look forward to that. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you then.